Hello, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me yesterday. I'm, of course, obviously really excited to have this conversation. This has been something I know last week we talked about executive dysfunction, and I feel like if we're going to kind of go in a theme where we're like, what might screw us up outside of the usual, right? Executive dysfunction was one of them. And then I think another one that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think another one that plagues a lot of us is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And nobody really talks about it, you know? So from you guys watching, tell me in the chat, have you heard of RSD or rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Have you heard about it? Yes or no, I guess. Keep it simple because we're going to talk about what it is in a minute. Tell me in the chat. Oh boy, do I live it every day. I definitely feel you there. Who else? No, but I know I have it. Becca. Not much about it. Yeah, and you know, it's a big name, right? It's a big name. But basically what it means is, in a very simplified way, what it means is an extreme sensitivity to a perceived criticism, exclusion, judgment, rejection, you know, obviously. And anytime that you're noticing that it causes this reaction that is like disproportionate to, I don't want to say like normal or abnormal, anything like that, but other people who don't have RSD might not really care all that much about something that, like, for us, if that RSD is triggered, it like hurts. Like it causes such a visceral reaction. It's something that you stew on all day. You know, you get wrapped up in an obsessive cycle thinking about it. It's like, you know, it like ruins your entire day. Like it makes you feel like shit. Has anyone ever experienced that in here? Tell me, put a one in the chat if you've experienced that. I'm telling you, I forgot I had to remind someone for tonight's Zoom. Hold on. Okay. See, one's in the chat. Mo, haha, you know. Yeah. So let's get into it a little bit. Now, I think the biggest thing is that it's like a sense of devastation almost. I want you guys to tell me what is something, if you can, and it might take you a minute to think about it, right? But can you think of a time where something really upset you and it seemed to like not be all that big a deal to the other people around you? Think of a situation where it really upset you, but it kind of seemed like the people around you didn't acknowledge it. What were you feeling? Tell me in the chat. Be honest about it. How intense when you pinpoint that event where you're like, I really gave so much of a shit, and the person I was talking to gave very little of a shit. What were some of the feelings that you were experiencing in the situation that you're thinking of? I bet who's like, I know I experience this every day, but I can't think of a situation. I feel like that's how it is with these thought questions. So it could be, I wrote down some situations here. Um, Minor criticism, overanalyzing interactions, fearing people. This is a big one. Fearing people are upset with you, avoiding situations that could lead to rejection, even if it's not really a huge possibility or it wouldn't be like the end of the world, but even the possibility of a rejection, completely avoiding it. Emotional outbursts that are exponentially bigger than what you usually exhibit. Like something will just trigger you, and it's like it's a this massive reaction. What else did I say here? Emotional outbursts or shutting down when you're feeling criticized. If you're in a group and you're feeling unheard or criticized, you might want to just clam up. You don't want to be a part of it anymore. You know, you might want to write off someone entirely. And it's a quick switch. It's like from good to bad in 10 seconds kind of thing. Let me see in the chat. I mean, I do all of these. Yep. I hear ya. I literally used to teach people to celebrate their writing rejections, and yet I sobbed every time a story was rejected and thought I wanted to quit writing. 100%. I'm gonna burn it all down. You know, like that's like the feeling. Like in the moment, it feels like you have to do something extreme, like you have to respond in some kind of way, or like it's this just bursting feeling. I cry in private. No one knows I was hurt, like at all. I really wear a mask. That's the other thing. It can be exhausting when you feel like you have to mask because, if you feel like everyone's rejecting you often, you're not going to also be excited to be vulnerable in front of those people too. That adds a whole other layer to it. You don't want to let your guard down in that way. And maybe there's, someone who doesn't have RSD maybe wouldn't have built a guard up around that. But now it's like that perceived rejection. You want to protect yourself from feeling that way. So guard goes right up. The mask, we tighten the mask because people will feel unsafe. That's okay, Chastity. Welcome. So yeah, we were just basically going over it so far, and the fact that it is a devastating and powerful feeling derived from feeling rejected, criticized, judged, excluded, those kind of feelings. Anything like that, it can trigger this extreme response. So it's also very connected to neurodivergence, surprise, surprise, right? And not just, I mean, you hear about it a lot with ADHD, but it also is connected to OCD, CPTSD, all the acronyms. It's high anxiety, any kind of neurodivergence like that can also, this is basically like your brain trying to analyze and protect you from a situation. So, especially those of us who maybe feel like we don't have the best or most clear social cues, we become even more sensitive to perceived criticism, right? Because we don't have people going around telling us all day, hey, you're doing a good job, or hey, you're doing that right. It would be great if you did. So the second that someone says something that we may be considered like we might feel like we're disappointing someone, or someone's mad at us, or they think we're not as good, or whatever, it's a huge letdown. Because we almost are like, we try so hard to be what we're expected to be that when that's rejected, it hurts way more. Who's relating to this? Put a one in the chat if you are relating to this. See some ones coming out here. Lots of ones. What do you think, like, if anyone is willing to share in the chat, has there ever been a situation where you've held yourself back from, like, in terms of career or friends or anything really, out of fear of having RSD being triggered? Chastity, I don't have extreme emotional range like that. You know what's interesting is it doesn't always have to play out like an outward extreme emotion, right? It can be something where it causes a fawn type of situation where we shut down. It could be a situation where we write, like I was saying before, we could write someone off entirely because it's our way of protecting ourselves from that, or from gauging a situation that we don't know how to act in. We don't know how to mask in it. We don't know how to be accepted in it. So it can trigger a lot of anxiety and manifest in other ways. A lot of extreme rigidity that can happen, in a situation where you feel like you're losing control almost, but you're not. It's not like a losing control, like you're like upset and exasperated about it. It's like losing control in I'm misunderstood, I'm aggravated, I'm annoyed, you know? Or I'm just like fawn, shut down. Guys, it is so hot in this house. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna do this. It is what it is. Sweatshirt on, crazy ass. It's like 80 degrees out. So the issue is, and how this connects to us with hormonal issues, is that when you have a response like this triggered, it affects your nervous system. And when your nervous system is affected, your adrenaline, your cortisol, your hunger cues, your fullness cues, your ability to sleep deeply, all of those things can be affected because of something that could trigger you even early in the day. Has anyone had a situation before? Put a one in the chat if you've had a situation before where you felt misunderstood, triggered, rejected, whatever, and it literally like you felt like you were on edge the rest of the day and you had that like buzzing anxiety feeling where like you just extreme stress. So even if it happened early on in the day, it lingered at my job every day for a long time. Whew. I know that's true. I know we've talked about that. The rest of the week, it felt like, yeah, it really lingers. And then when you try to, I don't know about you guys, but it's like if you feel like you try to talk to someone about it who doesn't get it, it makes it feel worse because if they don't get it, because it's almost like you feel like a freak for feeling that way. You know, like I mean, we've all been told the worst thing you could be is sensitive. And I think that's interesting because my autistic ass sometimes lacks sensitivity, but still having a little leftover anxiety from the friend thing the other day. Yeah, it'll linger. It'll friggin' linger. I'm trying to think of a situation where I had really, really intense RSD. My brain is mush. Should have thought about that and written one down. Um, but it becomes now it's something that I can pinpoint so easily, which I'm going to explain to you guys how to do that and how I got to the point where I did. Now I have an easier time hanging out in the gray area. And you'll hear me say that a lot with like dieting, like quote unquote dieting, with everything, is that it's really hard. Our neurodivergence really likes us to be polarizing, where it's like all one way or all the other way. We can be rigid, but learning to live in the gray area or like learning what that gray area even is helps. I don't want to say get rid of it because I still have my RSD triggered for sure. But I had a good example. I wish I could remember which one it was. Anyway, let's see. People usually tell me I get it, but yeah, it's like they make you feel like shit for feeling that way. You know, and the butt totally rubs me the wrong way. That means they don't really get it. Yeah, 100%. Oh, okay, I remember. I remember. Okay. So years ago, I don't know if you guys like these tangents, but bear with me. I went to Mexico with who were at that time close friends of mine and Nick's. And it was supposed to start out where it was like I organized it. It was just a vacation, like it was just a trip. And it ended up becoming that my friends, like the guy that I was like actually one of my best friends wanted to get married. I'm sorry, wanted to get engaged. Wanted to get engaged. So it became an engagement trip and it became having to keep like I somehow got the job of like keeping this ring safe through our travels into Mexico because he didn't want his soon to be fiance to find the ring in their luggage and stuff. So I got tasked with this. So my anxiety was really high. Then we had to find our rental cars. We flew separately, so we had to meet up when we were there. I didn't know where we were headed, which those of you who followed me during my Sayulita, Mexico trip, you remember how the house situation went. It was really stressful already. And I remember that and now these two people that we went with, at the time, I didn't know I was quite as neurodivergent as I am. Like I just thought I had ADHD, quote unquote, just and like a touch of OCD. I really didn't recognize that in myself a lot. But the people I was with were not very, I don't know what to call it. They're like the types that don't really believe in mental health stuff, you know, like the kinds that would like scoff at therapy or like make fun of someone or like say they're just being sensitive. They were those types of people already before we even went to Mexico. So my anxiety is getting higher and higher. And I remember I got really annoyed because Nick wasn't listening to me when we had moved to a new location, and he wasn't listening to me as I was giving him directions on how to get to like the leasing office so we could freaking unpack our bags, get this stupid ring out of my possession, and move on with the trip, right? So I'm trying to like offer up stuff, and someone said something that was basically like leave it alone, like you're being controlling or like something like that. And that was it. Like I shut down and I was like I was seething on the inside. And I was like, nobody wants to listen to me on this trip. I shouldn't have even planned it. Should I get my own place? Should I leave them and just go to my own, like no one's even understanding me. So I tried to rationalize with my like the girl that came with us, my best friend, quote unquote, soon to be fiance. We were by ourselves and I like found myself trying to like explain why I was feeling that way and like apologize because I felt I was getting really heated and I also knew I didn't want to be. So I felt bad about it. So I'm trying to tell her and she goes, "No, I know, but like just relax." No, I know, but like we're here already. So why are you still upset? And that was rough. That I'm just gonna go stay somewhere by myself at this rate. I think I like buried myself in our room at that one place. I was like, I'm not coming out for 2 days. Like, it was bad. It was bad. I could not articulate really why I was feeling so emotionally like it wasn't because I was just trying to be an asshole, It was just we had a lot going on and the minute I felt like people thought I was being ridiculous or I was being overly sensitive or whatever, it was like a switch was turned on and I didn't want to speak to anyone. I wasn't impressed with anything. We went to this like beautiful restaurant that night with these amazing views and I was still like just absolutely stewing in it. I didn't even like I don't even think I smiled in pictures. Like it was a total brat meltdown. But in the inside, because I wasn't about to like freak out at people and so, oh man, I was sweaty before the story. Now I'm like, but it happens. It probably took a good 2 days for me to just like move on from that. And I don't think people understand that. I'm not like an irrational, illogical person, but I don't think people understand that unless they experience it. I like literally didn't want to speak to anyone. I look like such a sourpuss and I was like, I loved it. I was glad we were there. So reminds me of my ex BFF who would say stuff like this, but also say things like, you must not have anxiety as bad as I do. Oh my God, I can't when people make it a competition. Because she had to take Xanax every night. I always say, I'm like, there's no like, what are you getting? The gold medal of struggle? Like, I don't, people like that are amazing to me. But yeah, that's RSD. Now, here's the thing. Like I was saying before, where this affects those of us with hormone issues is having a situation that upsets you like that. And then even though you might not be exhibiting it on the outside, continuing to harbor those feelings, continuing to be on edge like that, that's an issue for fight or flight, right? The fight or flight mechanism. Your nervous system is engaged. And whenever that is happening, that the only reason that's happening is because of hormones. Adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones, though that's what starts getting released into your bloodstream because your brain thinks that there is an imminent threat. And if there's an imminent threat, you better be prepared. So, fight or flight, extra hormones. And good point, Caitlin, you were saying caffeine makes me crazy sensitive. Caffeine especially, I mean, I think all caffeine to a certain degree, but especially coffee caffeine, the body recognizes it as cortisol. Like the components, not the components, the molecular structure of it is very similar to cortisol. So if you're drinking, if you have caffeine, you might notice you get this like really keyed up stress feeling. That's because that keyed up feeling is like your body is interpreting it as cortisol. And if we are already, I know it's like a buzzword these days, like everybody on Instagram, like some asshole who barely graduated high school, and makes candles at home is talking about how we have too much cortisol these days. But like truly, we in here, when you have PCOS, thyroid issues, insulin resistance, all of that, you naturally do have cortisol irregularity. So any additional, whether it be stress, caffeine in some cases, it might key that up even further. The thing also about cortisol and adrenaline is those are androgenic hormones. So if you have androgenic dominant PCOS, like issues with your testosterone and things like that, those are all hormones that basically add to the broth. when it comes to extra androgens. Same thing with like extra insulin. Insulin's an androgenic hormone, so you never hear anybody talking about stress treatment for PCOS, but you guys who have been in CCA with me for, however long you've been, you could see stress management is such a big part of this for a reason. Let me see what you're saying here. Caffeine makes me sweaty and panicky. Yep, sugar makes me tired and angry. And it's good to notice those things too, because the more you start to learn your body, it's not all, I mean, I know I'm like beating a dead horse here, but like it's not all one size fits all. It's the gray area, it's the black and white. Every one of us is different. Every one of our bodies is different. And knowing what triggers make it worse are super important. And I think this is, RSD sneaks into our everyday life in a lot of ways, and we don't even realize it. Not to mention, I think that, if you have body image issues as well, I think that that feeds into the RSD because we live in a society that is constantly telling us that unless you are a certain size, a certain look, a certain whatever, that you're basically like you're rejected. If you think about that conceptually, we have a very small mold to fit, otherwise we're not good enough. So that pants that are too tight on you now that used to be fitting, every time you feel that waistband, right? It's like, it's not your typical RSD, but if you really want to try to follow that train of thinking down, could it not be connected to RSD when we live in a society that rejects the idea that we are valued out all over a certain size? So another way to look at this before we get into some coping strategies is for those of you who have thyroid issues and thyroid involvement, right? This never gets talked about enough, but if you have hypothyroidism, especially, the depression that comes with thyroid problems is like its own depression. It is like this thick, sad, weepy, heavy feeling. And I don't know if any of you guys in here have experienced that, especially like that's how whenever in the past I've known it's time to like fix my thyroid dosage, the first thing that shows up for me is this intense sadness. And RSD, like when you're already operating at that place of hypothyroid depression and anything happens, anything small, it could be like I don't know. You could like drop a fork in the back of the dishwasher and have a hard time fishing it out. And your whole life is like, what are you even here for? You should just go play traffic tag. Like just it's disproportionate feelings of like I suck, this is bad, I'm not, like it's this intense rush over something small. And that can happen a lot more when your thyroid is off. That can also happen a lot for those of you who maybe your TSH is okay, maybe your T3, your T4 is okay, but if you have a lot of antibodies present, that can also affect your fluctuation throughout the day. So maybe your labs aren't quite getting that correctly because they work on averages. So it's something that's very, very common. It doesn't mean that you're just sensitive and annoying. It means that there is a connection between all of this. And we're not even going to get into like the whole like prerequisite precursor with trauma. When you're growing up in trauma, when you have childhood trauma, it puts you at a much, much higher risk of having RSD on top of everything else. Because think about the stakes when you were young and you were going through that trauma. The stakes were really high. A lot of unsafe things were going on. A lot of, maybe it doesn't have to be like abusive trauma necessarily. Maybe you moved around a lot as a kid. Maybe you dealt with parents splitting up as a kid and had the rug pulled out from under you. There's a lot of different things that can cause quote unquote trauma that can linger into adulthood and manifest as RSD. So, oh my God, yes, my kid's psych was starting to the protocol for PMDD, which is we're definitely at, I mean, PMDD time, it's like a giant RSD, walking RSD phase. It's horrible. But she wanted to be so specific because my kid also has Hashi, and doctor said on paper that the doctor would read it as an endocrine issue. It's all connected and really intense, you know? So We're gonna get into the coping strategies, but I want to know, share in the chat, what has stood out to you the most from me yapping thus far? What have you connected with? What questions do you have, if any? Tell me in the chat. Biggest takeaways before we move on to some coping. You know, I'm a feedback queen. I relate to it all. Yay, but not. You know, like I like that you know that you're not alone and you're not crazy, but like I'm sorry that you know that you understand this feeling. What stands out to you guys from this? You know, especially some of you who've said, you know, I don't know too much about this. What stands out to you now hearing more about it? Really hope my voice prevails for the rest of today, this call. I also think, you know, while you guys are sending over your biggest takeaways in the chat, I also think that the workplace is already not always built for people who aren't neurotypical. And I find that conversations between people and at work, it's like the perfect environment for RSD, honestly. And for me back in the day, I'm thinking about like I always felt like I was painted into a corner where I didn't want to always seem like difficult or like there was just something like I was always like annoyed with something or like I seemed like the overly critical one, you know, but it was because I almost like was on the lookout to not look dumb all the time. Like I was always trying to avoid having RSD triggered without even knowing that that's what I was doing. So it was really stressful trying to figure out how to interact with people, how to like, you know, where I only knew how to be the way I knew how to be. And all I desperately just didn't want to seem stupid or not be considered, you know, or taken seriously at all times. Relate to it all. I don't think I have it. I think I've known too many manipulative people. That's also another thing. I mean, you know, if you RSD can be any intense response or shutdown, like I was saying, to a perceived criticism, exclusion, whatever. But there are definitely people out there who I think manipulate that when they learn that about you, you know, not you specifically, about anyone. Um, I think we have people in our lives that gaslight us a lot of times about it. And it's like what we were saying, if someone else doesn't understand it, then it's easy to dismiss. Just the link that it has to hormone disruption. Yeah. Yeah, because that stress you're feeling, it's all hormones. It's all hormones. I feel like I'd get fired if I was myself. I feel like a lot of people think that. I mean, and listen, there are environments that are a little bit more accommodating than others. I'd like to hope that things progress a little and get a little bit better, you know, but there are plenty of places that are not built where you can be yourself. I definitely get that. And I would say before we jump in here, like maybe jot down, like if you feel like you can't be yourself in the workplace, put on paper what yourself looks like, acts like, is. You know, like who would you be if you could be yourself? Jot it down. Plan, you know, daydream about it. If you could, you know, just go in there, I don't know, you're lighting garbage pails on fire. I don't know what you do. I'm not going to judge, but okay, let's get into some coping strategies that I'm not going to pretend to be a complete expert on this, but at least have helped me, and I hope they help you. Tell me what you think. If you need to, you know, work on this a little bit more specifically, text me and we can like role play this out together. But first thing, self-awareness. So, and all of us possess it, but the first thing is to recognize when it's being at all triggered. And, you know, those of you who have done baby steps with me, I mean, you've all done baby steps with me, but when we're trying to change things, if you remember, the first thing I'll tell you to do is to collect the data. what are you tending to eat? What is in what you're eating? And then we move into, well, here's what we replace, here's what we change. So the first thing is you want to start to pinpoint when your being, your psyche, your emotions, when they are triggered at all, when you notice yourself getting annoyed, shutting down, whatever. Now that we've had this talk, I want you to look for it, and I want you to keep, it's going to sound stupid, but I want you to keep a rejection journal. Now, what did that look like? For me, the ADHD side of me wanted to have like my own journal, my own notepad. I'm blah, blah, blah. No, notes. The notes on my phone. I have so many like half completed notes on my phone, and I like it that way because I can't commit to finishing a notebook. So in your notes, you're going to just jot down the date, what you're feeling, what happened, and just start to pinpoint big or small, because obviously if you're having a big reaction, you're going to know that. You're going to realize that. But you might be having little reactions to it throughout the day that you're not realizing that that's still a part of your stress. That's still a hormone fluctuation, even if it's not a big meltdown, let's say. So first thing, try to become more self-aware of like, well, how do I handle different interactions and things, and keep a journal about it. Just track it somewhere. Okay. That's the first thing. Then the second thing, which is not easy to do, I think there's a threshold. I think that there's like, or I should say like a cutoff, where before the cutoff, you can think about nervous system regulation tools and stuff like that. And I can respect that once you've crossed that limit and you are now like, it gets impossible to stop and think about this kind of stuff, you know? Like you're already spiraling, you're already pissed off, there's no going back, you know? And at that point, these tools are not going to work. But if you catch yourself before you get to that point of no return, here's some stuff to try. All right. So one, I'm going to piss everybody off. I also, like, Nick has had to remind me of this, and I hate when he does, but your breathing does matter. Sorry. I know it annoys me too. I'm not telling you to take a deep breath, but I'm telling you to take a deep breath, because when we are in fight or flight, we are tense, we're holding up, our breathing changes. You might even get freaking stomach pains from breathing different. Like, it's just the first stop. It's not the whole, this is not the cure all. You're not going to feel better because you're breathing, but just as a friendly reminder that you might, if you're catching yourself in the throes of these feelings, might be all locked up and not breathing right. So, and that doesn't help at all. Okay. Don't hate me. So if that's the case, when you catch yourself in the midst of it, stop and do a deep breath. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm, I'm not so much a fan of like the whole deep cleansing breaths when you're pissed off or upset or like devastated feeling. I'm more a fan of inhaling and exhaling with the aggression in which you are experiencing the situation. So if you aggressively breathe in and breathe out, in my opinion, I feel like that helps relieve more stress than if you're trying to quiet yourself down to be like, oh, woosah. That annoys me personally in the moment. So I'll just straight up like angry breathe is what I call it. So first thing, identify your triggers, keep your rejection journal. Then now, if we're looking at some nervous system regulation, first thing, take a deep friggin' breath, an angry breath, whatever, like just relax yourself and take a breath, okay? Second thing is unbracing. Who remembers it? It's my favorite. So I can send you the video personally of the steps on what to do for unbracing. But that's the thing that I do where I tell you guys, I'm like, shake your hands out and then relax your shoulders away from your ears. And then rotate them, rotate your neck. Oh my God, my neck's so stiff. Right? And then stretch your face out, smile. And then, right? That thing where we all look weird. Depending on the day, I will do that before and after completing every single task if it's like a very stressful day. Doing that exercise literally helps regulate your cortisol. It helps regulate your adrenaline. It tells your brain. There's a reason I call it unbracing, because like I said, when you're upset, you're all crunched up and you might not even recognize it. That is a silent connection between your body and your brain. Your body is telling your brain to literally brace for impact. So it's going to keep you keyed up at the threshold of fight or flight, because it's thinking that you're bracing for some kind of issue or threat or whatever. So by unbracing, you're helping your circulation improve. You're telling your brain, we're not worried, we're relaxed, we're jello, we're fine, right? And then that's your brain will listen to your body and be like, okay, cool. So I know it sounds crazy and it might even annoy you, but trust me, these little exercises work if you're able to catch it before it gets to the whole spiral out, crash out phase of the program, you know? Um, this one's really kind of crazy. Get a fluffy pillow. Hold the fluffy pillow. Put your face in the fluffy pillow. And then scream. Scream to the point that you literally shake. It sounds insane. No one's gonna hear you. Fluffy pillow, I'm telling you, I've put my phone on record in the next room to see what gets heard, and you can't hear anything when you scream in a fluffy pillow. So scream in a fluffy pillow. When you do this, it actually causes you to engage the vagus nerve, which is meant to be able to communicate electric impulses to the brain depending on what part of the body it's located in, right? But when it comes to your nervous system, when you're screaming, it is an extreme release. It's all, it basically communicates to your brain that you're releasing all of this tension that's held within. So it doesn't need to hold on to it anymore. And it feels friggin' good. It's a good way to exert a lot of crazy RSD energy. For those of you who do have the rage fits or extreme emotion, even if it's in private or whatever, if you've ever gotten to the point where you know it's irrational, but you feel like you want to like bite something or punch a hole in something, right? And even if that's not you as a person, it's only when you're pushed that you have that trigger that's gone on. Fluffy pillow screaming, I'm telling you, it helps. Sometimes you need something like that aggro to knock you out of it, you know? Another one on the physical side of things is do something physically exerting. This doesn't mean you have to like go for a run. I mean, if that's your preferred stress management, great. It is not mine. I am not a runner. But doing something that like makes you exert, like trying to do a plank. Do a plank until your body's shaking and you fall. Like you fall to the ground, you drop. Doing something like a wall sit where you just scooch down and you're up against the wall and you scooch down and squat to the point where your whole body is like shaking to hold yourself up. Something like that. If you're physically able to do that, it also is like an exerting of that extra nervous energy. And it pushes you out of the thought spiral around the rejection that you're facing or the criticism that you're facing. And like, if you can do squats, like also it's squats. So, whatever. So that's the physical side of stuff. Any questions on that? Put a 1 in the chat if you have no questions. Put a 2 in the chat if you want me to go back over it and just remind you. 1 in the chat if you have no questions. 2 if you want me to go back over it. See some 1s. Got some 1s, some 1s. Cool. Okay. Okay, cool. So that's the more physical side of it. Then the other side of it, the more emotional, or I shouldn't say emotional, mental side of it is challenging negative self-talk. Really good, right? Really easy to do. Not easy at all to do. But when you start to spiral about things and you start to think about it as, I suck. Are you telling yourself like all of like I call them like you have the black and white thoughts, right? So you're telling yourself, that's it. I have no more friends. I'm never going to fit in. I'm never going to, trust anyone. I'm never going to like all of that. And like, what is it about me and my life that this happens to me? And all of that's spiraling through, literally arguing with those with that. If anyone else argues with those thoughts, you're probably going to be like, shut the hell up. You don't know my life. But you want to I want you to argue with you, basically, and come back at those. And it doesn't have to be like a no, you're amazing, because you might not believe that right in that moment. But it could be something as, I don't want to spend time on this. I don't want to spend time on this. I know that sounds crazy, but having it be like, if something comes out and you're like, I'm facing rejection because no one understands me, and blah blah blah, like I'm working so hard and I'm not being valued, like you're going off, right? And in the moment you want to stop and you be like, wait, I don't want to tackle this right now. I don't want to do this right now. You'd be surprised when you're the person who does it, how effective that could be. So argue with the voice. Challenge that negative self-talk, because in that moment it is literally just an emotional response. um Write down, oh, I did this in the one of these Zooms lately. Was it the 5-5, when we talked about doing the like writing down or thinking about 5 things that are good about the current moment and 5 things that are true about the current moment? So to go back over that, 5 things that are good. The goal of this exercise is to keep it really small, really specific, only in the current moment and place. It's a grounding technique. So you don't want to say, okay, 5 things that are good. I have vacation coming up in July. That is good, but that's not going to do the trick here. The real exercise is having to slow down and force yourself to go from spiraling about everything to like being really present and focusing. Meaning, what is good right now? I have a new flavor in my water that I'm enjoying the taste of. It's strawberry kiwi, Propel. I'm a big fan. I have really comfy socks on that don't bother me, and that's hard to find. My chair is comfortable. The air conditioning feels nice now that I've taken that sweatshirt off, Okay, and so that's 5 things that are good. I think it's 5, whatever. 5 things that are true. I'm looking at my laptop right now. My thermos is a fake Stanley. It's a pink fake Stanley, a family, if you will. I took off my sweatshirt, good little things that are true. The work is in all the faces I made trying to think of what the hell I was going to say. That's why you're doing it, because you're forcing yourself to stop and get really present. So 5-5. 5 things that are good, 5 things that are true. Self-compassion. So talking to yourself as if you were talking to, I mean, this sounds like cheap advice, but like you talk to other people, right? And like if they're going through something, you tend to comfort them in some way, right? Extend that to yourself. And those of you listening to the recording or watching or whatever, if you're like, well, I'm not the world's most comforting person, well, do you offer them logic? You offer them lack of judgment? Do that for yourself. If you have a voice that tells you don't make excuses for yourself, fight that voice. Remember, what is it? What did I say? Challenge the negative self-talk. Boundaries. Boundaries and self-advocacy. This is the hard one. Let's say that you're having RSD triggered by somebody that you will have to continue to have an exchange with, a partner, a best friend, or any friend really, anyone that you want to continue being around. Now, this is a little bit tricky at work because maybe you don't want to be so vulnerable with people you don't really know. But let's say it's a situation where you can tell someone how you're feeling, or you would hope that you could tell someone how you're feeling. Then you'd want to bring it up to them and say to them and say, I don't know if you intended to mean it in any kind of way, but I'm feeling a little bit triggered about it. And you talk about what it is you're feeling. The only thing is, when you do that, you want to ask them, What was it that you intended? That's how you end it, because you want to tell them how you're feeling, but you want to let them know, like, I'm not sitting here telling you that I think you're a piece of shit and that you did this on purpose. Hell, you may trigger their RSD by telling them that, right? But you are telling them, you're saying, hey, I don't know if you intended to make me feel blah, 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 but I'm feeling a little bit triggered by it. Tell them what it is that you would need. I need you to maybe don't come at me so aggressively. I need you to be a little bit compassionate at the end of the day when my brain is fried. Whatever it is you need. I'm yelling because the baby's screaming. I'm sorry. I don't want to be yelling at you guys. Can you pick him up? Thank you. Sorry. You tell them I'm feeling a little bit triggered because of this. And then at the end of whatever it is you say to them, you say, what were your intentions? Because it gives them an opportunity. Listen, I'm not discounting that maybe they're an asshole. I don't know who you're talking to. Maybe they come back at you with some asshole response. I hope not. And I'll be, text me if that happens. But typically people, when you explain it in that way, they didn't mean it that way. That's not an excuse for if they like talked to you badly or made you feel bad. But sometimes hearing that, people will be like, oh, I didn't mean that. And then when you ask them and say, what were your intentions? You give them an opportunity to explain it. Again, this is all with a grain of salt and different from person to person. You may be dealing with an asshole, and this will be a way for you to see that because of how they will respond to you. So this is a little intimidating if you're not in a place to want to talk about it. But if you are, especially if this is like a romantic partner or like a very close friend or even a parent, if you have a parent that you can talk to about this kind of stuff, that isn't just going to be like, well, I guess I'm the worst. Start by telling them what you're feeling, end it by asking what they meant. You might still feel raw afterwards, but at least you'll feel a little bit satisfied that you spoke up for yourself and that you cleared the air a little bit. And then, the dust will settle over time in terms of any lingering feelings. Okay. Thoughts, takeaways. I'll send a list of this stuff. I will comment it on the Zoom. Did I comment the outline for the other one I did? I've been doing these different outlines because I want to actually comment it on the recording. So I will remember to start doing. Let me make a reminder for myself. Tell me in the chat. Biggest takeaways, thoughts from today, feedback. I'm always cool with you guys being off camera, but then I'm like, am I just talking? Like, are people hearing or liking what I'm saying? So I love the feedback because I want to make sure that what I'm covering is impactful. Reminder set. I will post this outline in the comments of the recording on the Facebook page. So sorry, this isn't really my topic. That's okay, Chastity. I'm glad you tuned in. Anyone else? Biggest takeaway? Something you're excited to try? Anything at all? I know Caitlin you were saying this, you were really relating to this. Stop the recording.